When I walked across that stage, cap balanced awkwardly on my head, the air thick with the scent of pride and fresh beginnings, I thought naively that my parents would be there. Clapping, maybe crying, maybe finally seeing me. Instead, the empty seats where they should have been stared back at me like two hollow eyes, a cruel reminder that they were somewhere else, blowing up balloons and lighting candles for my sister's 18th birthday. I remember gripping my diploma so tightly that the paper crinkled, the announcer's voice fading into the background as my stomach dropped. I had planned this moment for years, every late night studying, every breakdown I pushed through, every dollar I'd saved to make this day happen. And they chose her. Again. Hi everyone, I'm Amelia, and welcome back to Amelia Voice, where stories cut deep and truths hit harder than expected. Today, I'm sharing one that still feels like a punch to the gut. But trust me, by the end of it, you'll understand why this isn't just about a missed graduation. It's about the moment I realized the people I called family were living off a lie they didn't even know existed. Growing up, I was the responsible one. That's what Mom liked to call me whenever she needed something done, which was often. Amelia, can you help your sister with her homework? Amelia, can you stay home and watch her while we go out? Amelia, you're older, you should understand. And I did understand. I understood that my sister Chloe was the favorite. I understood that when she got into trouble, it was brushed off as youthful mistakes. But when I faltered, it was irresponsibility. Yet, I didn't complain. I told myself that love isn't measured in fairness, it's measured in presence. But when my parents missed my college graduation, I realized their presence had never really belonged to me. It started the week before graduation. I'd told them months in advance about the date, even helped book their hotel. They'd smiled and promised to be there. Then, 2 days before the ceremony, Mom called me. Her voice was cautious, almost apologetic, but I could hear the excitement bubbling underneath. "Sweetheart," she said, "Chloe's turning 18 this weekend and we're throwing her a big surprise party. You know how important this is to her. We'll celebrate your graduation later, okay?" My chest went tight. "Later?" I repeated. "Mom, this is my graduation. I worked my entire life for this." But she'd already decided. "Honey, you'll understand. You've always been so mature. We'll send you pictures from the party." The day came. The auditorium was full, parents, siblings, cheering families, and me. I looked out into the crowd, half expecting, half hoping to see them running in late, out of breath and apologetic. But they never came. My roommate's parents hugged me. My professors congratulated me. And all I could think about was how my own family didn't care enough to show up. When I got home that evening, I didn't even bother calling them. Instead, I opened my laptop and saw it, Chloe's Instagram post. A glittering birthday cake, a giant 18 balloon, and my parents standing beside her, smiling like they were living in a Hallmark movie. The caption read, "Best birthday ever. Love you, Mom and Dad." I didn't cry. I just sat there staring at the screen, numb. It took everything in me not to explode. But the truth? I was tired. Tired of always being the afterthought. Tired of working myself to the bone to make them proud when pride was something they only reserved for her. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the reason they even had a home to throw that party in was because of me. Every month, a payment quietly left my account and entered theirs. They thought Dad's investment from years ago was paying their mortgage. They thought the bank was being generous. They had no idea that the responsible one they kept overlooking had been their silent benefactor for almost 3 years. See, it started after Dad lost his job. They didn't tell me at first. I found out by accident when I came home one weekend and saw a stack of foreclosure notices shoved behind a pile of unopened mail. They were embarrassed, panicked, talking about selling the house. So I stepped in. I had a part-time job and a small inheritance from Grandma. Money they didn't know I had because it was left in my name. I started paying their mortgage through an automatic transfer under the bank's name. It wasn't much at first, but I kept it going, month after month, even when it meant skipping meals or taking extra shifts. I told myself it was temporary, that they'd figure things out soon, That once Dad was back on his feet, they'd be proud of me, not just for my degree, but for keeping them afloat. But standing there at graduation, realizing they couldn't even be bothered to show up, something inside me snapped. That night, while they were probably singing happy birthday and cutting cake, I drafted an email. I attached every receipt, every payment confirmation, every bank statement. And then I wrote, "Since you couldn't make it to my graduation, I thought you'd like to see what I've been doing with my degree, keeping a roof over your heads." I hit send, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. I wanted them to know, not to hurt them, but because I couldn't carry the weight of their ignorance anymore. The next morning, my phone exploded with calls and messages. First Mom, then Dad, then Chloe. I didn't answer. I needed them to sit with the truth, but the story doesn't end there, not even close. Because what followed wasn't just guilt or regret. It was revelation. It was watching everything they believed about me and themselves crumble. And when they showed up at my door 2 days later, faces pale and eyes swollen, I realized they still didn't understand what I'd truly lost. When I opened the door, the air between us was thick enough to choke on. My mother stood there, clutching her phone like it was some kind of shield, her mascara smeared in streaks that made her look smaller than I'd ever seen her. Dad hovered behind her, his face tight, jaw clenched, like he'd been holding back something ugly for hours. Chloe stood a few steps away, her arms crossed, her usual confidence flickering under a layer of confusion. I didn't say anything at first. I just stepped aside and let them in, because despite everything, part of me still wanted to hear them out. Mom started crying before she even sat down. "Amelia, sweetheart, we didn't know," she sobbed. "We had no idea you were doing all that." I stared at her, and for the first time I didn't feel sympathy. I felt empty. "That's the point," I said quietly. "You didn't know because you never asked. You never wanted to know." Dad finally spoke, his voice sharp and defensive. "You should have told us, Amelia. We didn't ask you to pay for anything." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "You didn't have to ask," I said. "I heard you fighting about losing the house, about the bills stacking up. You were too proud to tell me, so I fixed it. That's what I've always done, fix things." His eyes flicked toward the floor. For a moment, no one spoke. Chloe finally broke the silence. "So, you've been paying for everything? Like the house we live in?" she asked, her voice small. I nodded. "Every month. While you guys were out shopping, vacationing, and throwing parties, I was making sure you didn't end up on the street." Her mouth fell open, and Mom started crying harder. Then came the words that really broke me. "We didn't think your graduation was that big of a deal," Mom whispered through her tears. "It's just a ceremony. You already know we're proud of you." I felt my chest tighten, and for a second, I thought I might scream. "Proud?" I repeated. "You didn't even call me. You didn't text. You didn't care." I could see the realization dawning in her eyes, but it didn't make me feel better. "You've always made excuses," I said. "When Chloe needed something, you moved heaven and earth. When I needed support, you told me to understand. Well, I do understand now. I understand exactly where I stand in this family." Dad tried to reason with me, but his tone was still full of that quiet authority he always used to end arguments. "We made mistakes," he said. "But family means forgiveness. You can't hold this over us forever." I smiled, but it wasn't warm. "I'm not holding anything over you," I said. "I'm done holding anything for you." And that's when I told them the rest, the part that made my mom's face go white and my dad's hands start to shake. "The house is almost paid off," I said. "But after next month, the payments stop." "I've done my part." Dad looked up sharply. "You can't just stop paying. We'll lose everything," he said. I tilted my head, letting the words sink in. "No," I said. "You'll finally start to take responsibility. You'll finally understand what it feels like to earn something instead of expecting it." Chloe started crying then, and for a brief second, guilt twisted in my chest. But I pushed it down. She'd always been the golden child, shielded from every hardship. Maybe it was time she saw what real consequences looked like. "Amelia, please," Mom begged. "We can work this out." We'll pay you back. That almost made me laugh again. You can't even pay your own bills, I said. How are you going to pay me back? Dad's face hardened. You've become cruel, he said. You're not the daughter I raised. I met his gaze and said, No, Dad. You raised a daughter who took care of everyone but herself. That's not noble. That's neglect. They left not long after, the silence in their wake almost deafening. I stood by the window and watched them drive away, their car disappearing down the street like a piece of my past finally peeling off. I wanted to feel free, but instead I felt hollow. For years I'd tied my worth to their approval, and now that I'd cut the cord, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. That night, I sat in my room scrolling through photos from graduation. My classmates beamed beside their parents, arms around them, flowers in hand. I zoomed in on my own picture, the forced smile, the empty space beside me, and realized that for the first time, I wasn't sad about it. I was done begging for something they were never capable of giving. Over the next few weeks, the silence stretched on. No calls, no messages. I thought maybe that was it, that they'd quietly fade out of my life. But life has a funny way of throwing you back into the fire just when you think it's finally over. One evening, as I was making dinner, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. Her voice was trembling. Amelia, she said. You need to come home. Something's happened. I froze. What happened? I asked. She hesitated, then whispered. Dad got a letter from the bank. They're foreclosing. Mom's a wreck. My stomach turned, but I didn't say anything. Please, she said. They don't know what to do. I drove back that night, though every mile of that drive felt like betrayal to myself. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the garden overgrown. When Mom opened the door, her face was pale and exhausted. We got your letter, she said softly. We didn't think you meant it. Inside, papers were scattered across the table. Foreclosure notices, overdue bills, desperation written in ink. I felt the weight of all of it, the same pressure that had lived on my shoulders for years. You could have avoided this, I said quietly. You just had to care enough to try. Dad looked up from the couch, his voice low and trembling. We thought you'd always be there, he said. We didn't realize how much we relied on you until you stopped. And for the first time, I saw it. The fear, the humility, the realization that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. But what he said next changed everything. There's something we need to tell you, he said. Something we should have told you years ago. My pulse quickened as soon as Dad said those words. His tone was grave, different, heavy in a way that made every nerve in me tighten. Mom's eyes darted to his, like she was silently begging him not to say it. But it was too late. Tell me what? I demanded, folding my arms as if crossing them could somehow protect me from whatever storm was coming. Dad ran a hand over his face, looking 10 years older in that single moment. The reason we lost the money years ago, the reason we almost lost the house, it wasn't because of bad investments, he said slowly. It was because of your grandfather's will. I frowned, confused. What does that have to do with anything? He sighed. He left something. To you, not to us. To you alone. We didn't tell you because we didn't want to burden you with responsibility so young. My breath hitched. Left me what? I whispered. Mom swallowed hard. He left you the house, Amelia, she said. Not us. He changed the will before he passed. The mortgage, the title, it's in your name. My mind went blank. I stared at them, trying to process the words, but they didn't make sense at first. You mean, I said slowly, I've been paying for a house that already belonged to me? Mom nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. We didn't think it mattered. You were still in college, and your father thought it would be too much responsibility. We figured we'd handle things until you graduated. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The irony was so sharp it hurt. I had spent years sacrificing for them, skipping meals, losing sleep, just to save their home, when in reality, it was mine all along. 1,000 memories flooded back, the missed birthdays, the long shifts, the guilt I carried every time I thought I wasn't doing enough. "You let me pay for everything," I said, my voice breaking. "You watched me struggle, and you said nothing." Dad tried to step forward, but I backed away. "We thought it was temporary," he said. "We always planned to tell you after things settled down." "After what?" I snapped. "After you'd drained every ounce of energy I had left? After you'd let me believe I owed you something?" My voice trembled, but the anger was steady, like a fire that had been waiting years for oxygen. "You didn't protect me," I said. "You used me." Mom broke down completely then, sinking into the chair, sobbing into her hands. "We didn't mean for it to happen like this," she cried. "We were scared. We didn't want to lose the family home. We thought if you knew it was yours, you'd sell it and move away." That last part hit me harder than I expected. "You didn't tell me the truth because you were afraid I'd leave you?" I asked, incredulous. "You made me leave you. You made me choose between helping my family and having a life." Dad was silent, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For the first time, he looked small, almost fragile. The man who'd always seemed in control had finally run out of excuses. I sat down, my legs shaking. "So what happens now?" I asked quietly. Dad hesitated before answering. "Technically," he said, "the house can't be foreclosed. It's in your name. But if you don't want to keep paying, the bank will still come after it. They'll seize it eventually." He looked at me, eyes full of a desperate kind of hope. "You could transfer the deed back to us," he said softly. "We could refinance. Start fresh." I stared at him, stunned. After everything, after all the lies and betrayal, he was still asking me to save them. Something in me broke then, not in the fragile way it had before, but in a final, decisive way. I stood up and said, "No, I'm not giving you the house." Their eyes widened in shock. "You've lived your entire lives expecting someone else to fix your mistakes," I said. "Not anymore. I'm done being your safety net." Dad's face flushed with anger. "You'd really take your parents' home away from them?" he asked, his voice rising. I looked him straight in the eye. "It's my home. You just forgot that because it was easier to believe I was disposable." Mom tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please, Amelia," she whispered. "We're still your parents." I shook my head slowly. "No, you're people I used to look up to. Now you're just people who taught me what not to become." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. The clock ticked. Chloe stood frozen near the doorway, her face pale. "What about me?" she whispered suddenly. I turned to her, my voice softer now. "You have a choice," I said. "You can keep pretending everything's fine and keep living off lies, or you can start over. I'm not dragging you down with them." That night I didn't stay. I packed a few things from my old room, the one that still had my high school posters and dusty trophies. As I was leaving, Chloe followed me outside. "I didn't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear I didn't know any of it." I looked at her for a long time, trying to find traces of the sister I'd protected for so long. "I know you didn't," I said finally. "But you saw enough to know how they treated me. You just didn't want to believe it." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything." I hugged her briefly, feeling the weight of years melt into a single moment. "You're still young," I said. "Don't make the same choices they did." When I drove away, the house grew smaller in my rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. The weight I'd carried for years, the guilt, the obligation, the exhaustion, finally began to lift. But as the road stretched ahead, I felt something else too, uncertainty. For the first time in my life, I didn't have anyone to take care of. I didn't have a purpose that revolved around fixing other people. I was free, and freedom, I realized, could be terrifying. Over the next few weeks, I stayed with a friend from college while I tried to figure out what to do next. My inbox filled with messages from Mom and Dad. Apologies, promises, guilt trips. But I didn't respond. Then one morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It wasn't from them. It was from the law firm that had handled my grandfather's estate. The subject line read, "Re-Final Asset Distribution." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a document confirming everything Dad had said, and something more. My grandfather hadn't just left me the house. He'd left me everything else too. The savings, the investments, the stocks. Every last bit of it was mine. There was even a note attached in his handwriting. For the one who sees what others ignore. Build your own legacy, Amelia. I sat there staring at the letter for what felt like hours. All this time, I'd been fighting to keep a family together that was built on half-truths and expectations. But maybe my grandfather had seen through it all. Maybe he'd known that I'd need a way out someday, a clean slate. And that's when the idea hit me, sharp and sudden. I wasn't just going to start over. I was going to make them see who I truly was. Not their caretaker. Not their scapegoat. Not their invisible daughter. I was going to become something they could never ignore again. The next few months felt like a blur, but for the first time in years, every decision I made belonged to me. I used a portion of the inheritance to move into a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just quiet, sunlit, and mine. I remember standing in that empty living room, the keys cold in my hand, and feeling this strange rush of power and peace at the same time. No parents calling for help. No bills that weren't mine. Just silence. And possibility. But I wasn't interested in just peace. I wanted purpose. I wanted to build something that screamed independence, something that made my parents realize they hadn't broken me. They'd built the fire that would burn their expectations to ashes. That's when I started my own small media company, a platform that told stories like mine, stories of overlooked daughters, silent supporters, and the quiet rage of being taken for granted. I called it Legacy Lens, a tribute to my grandfather's last message, build your own legacy. At first, it was just me and my laptop. I recorded voiceovers late at night, edited videos on a hand-me-down computer, and used my old college mic that crackled whenever I spoke too loud. But people listened. My first video, When Love Feels Like Debt, went viral within a week. Comments flooded in, daughters, sons, people from all walks of life who felt invisible, thanking me for saying what they couldn't. They said my voice made them feel seen. The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl whose family never listened now had thousands of strangers hanging on her every word. Every upload brought in more followers, more stories, and eventually, money. The kind that could pay rent, hire a small team, and grow something real. And with every success, I felt the sting of the past fade a little more, until the night my phone lit up with a familiar name. Mom. I stared at the screen, that old ache bubbling up. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Amelia, we saw your videos. Your father's been watching them every night. We're proud of you. I froze. That word again, proud, the one they'd thrown around so carelessly, as if it erased years of neglect. I deleted the voicemail without finishing it. I wasn't ready. Not yet, but they didn't stop. A few days later, Chloe showed up at my studio. Older, softer somehow, with a nervous smile that told me she'd rehearsed what she was about to say. They're losing everything, she said. The bank's taking the house. They have nowhere to go. I looked at her, unmoved. The house was mine, I said quietly. They lost something that was never theirs to begin with. She flinched but didn't argue. I know, she said. But they're different now. Dad's working again. Mom's trying. They talk about you every day. I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. But the wounds were too deep, and time had turned them into scars that didn't fade easily. You can tell them I wish them well, I said. But I'm not their savior anymore. Weeks passed. My channel, Amelia Voice, took off in ways I couldn't have imagined. I shared stories of resilience, betrayal, and healing, always from others, but always somehow about myself. One video, The Family That Forgot My Name, hit over 1 million views in 3 days. That's when a journalist reached out for an interview. Your stories sound so personal, she said during the recording. Are they inspired by real experiences? I smiled into the camera and said, every story has a little truth in it. Sometimes that's what makes it hurt the most. When the episode aired, my inbox exploded. One message stood out. It was from my father. He'd written, "We watched the interview. You're right. We didn't see you for who you were. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know something. We paid the final mortgage payment yesterday. It's done. No more debt. We thought you should be the first to know, since you were the one who carried it the longest." For a long time, I just stared at that message. No anger, no tears, just silence. Then I typed back, "I'm glad you finally learned how to stand on your own." And for the first time, there was no bitterness behind the words, just closure. But the story didn't end there. Because a week later, I got another email, this time from the same law firm that had handled my grandfather's estate. The subject line read, "Addendum, Secondary Beneficiary Clause." My heart skipped. I opened it, scanning the document quickly until my eyes caught the final paragraph. Apparently, my grandfather had included a contingency plan, a trust that would activate once I turned 25. And I was turning 25. Next month. The clause stated that if I demonstrated independence and purpose, the trust would release an additional inheritance, but not to me directly. Instead, it would fund any project, charity, or business under my name that benefited others. I laughed out loud, tears forming in my eyes. It was like my grandfather had seen the future, seen the exact person I'd become, and built a gift that would outlive every betrayal I'd endured. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. When the funds came through, I expanded Legacy Lens into a full foundation. We started producing documentaries, funding community storytellers, and giving scholarships to students who'd grown up like me, kids who'd been overlooked, underestimated, and left behind. Every project carried my name, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that I'd built my future from the pieces of my past. Then, one quiet afternoon, as I was wrapping up a recording, I got a knock on my studio door. I turned, expecting my assistant, but it was Chloe. She looked different this time. Not nervous. Not guilty. Just peaceful. "They moved into an apartment downtown," she said softly. "It's small, but they're happy. Dad said you were right. They needed to learn." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "They asked me to tell you thank you. Not for the money, but for the lesson." I exhaled, the weight I didn't know I was still carrying finally slipping away. "Tell them I said they're welcome," I said. She nodded, and before leaving she added, "You know, Grandpa would be proud of you." This time that word didn't sting. It felt right. That night, I recorded one final video. Not a story from someone else, but my own. I didn't use my usual script. I just spoke, my voice steady and honest. "Sometimes," I said, "the people who should love you the most are the ones who teach you what love isn't. Sometimes, you have to lose everything they built for you to realize you were meant to build something bigger. And sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about freeing yourself enough to move on." I paused, letting the silence stretch before finishing. This isn't revenge. It's rebirth. And for anyone out there who feels invisible, your story isn't over. It's just beginning. When I hit upload, I didn't check the comments. I didn't care about the views. For once, I wasn't performing for anyone. I was just me, Amelia, the girl who carried her family's weight, the woman who turned that pain into power, the voice who found her purpose. And as the night settled around me, I realized something I'd been waiting my whole life to feel. I wasn't the responsible one anymore. I was the free one.